Hello. Hey, everybody. It's Dr. Trish Leigh. Welcome to our webinar on ADHD myths and facts. It's 7 o'clock on the nose, so I'm just going to wait a minute or two for people to trickle in, and then we will get rolling. I'm glad I see people joining me, so I'm glad you're here tonight. I know how busy life is, and we are moving into a busy season, so thank you for taking the time to be here. Okay, I'm just checking, and I'm going to fire up my PowerPoint, and I'm going to share my screen with you, and we will get going. So, okay, so I just wanted to tell you before I do that you can, hang on. Sorry, since I'm already in the middle of this. Okay, so you can ask me a question at any time in the question box. Hopefully you see the Q&A box. You can put your question in, and usually it pops up while I'm talking. So if you put a question in, I'll acknowledge the fact that we have a question, but I will save them to the end. This is a half-hour webinar, and I know a lot of people are tightly scheduled, so we will try to stay on track till 7:30, and then at the end of the webinar, I will answer all the questions, and I'm happy to stay on as long as people want me to stay on and any questions that need to be answered. Sound okay? Okay, so without further ado, we're going to talk about ADHD myths and facts. You need to know the truth to be able to help your loved ones. So again, before we start, I just wanted to tell you, and this is apropos that we have a map of the country. I work with neurofeedback experts across the country. So there are people on this webinar tonight from, actually there's some people internationally I know that are joining us tonight on this webinar, but our webinar is across the entire country. So I'm not just talking to people about coming into Leigh Brain and Spine for neurofeedback. That is not my goal. My goal is to educate you on ADHD, and I'm going to touch on anxiety just a little bit because I always do, so I'm sure I will again. But I just wanted to let you know that I have people on from the whole country, so I'm going to be talking globally to all of these states. So, which leads us to the fact that we are becoming an ADHD nation. The problem with that is we are becoming over-medicated. So I want people to know what is causing ADHD so that you can compensate in the short run and heal it in the long run. So here, and these numbers are a little bit older, but that's how numbers work when the Center for Disease Control and Prevention take a consensus, and then they accumulate the numbers, and then it takes them a couple years to do it again. But you can see that these numbers are from 2007, and the rate of ADHD diagnoses are going up, and through the roof. And there's more boys, it's double the amount of boys that are diagnosed with ADHD than girls. And that makes sense, honestly, because developmental delays and disorders affect young men, boys and young men, more than it does girls. So that is just the way that it goes. But what I want you to see is these states that have dark red have a high percentage of children who are on ADHD medication. And the lighter the colors get, that's less kids that are prescribed medications. So you can see that across the country, there are higher and higher numbers of medication being prescribed because people think it's the only thing that they can do when they're diagnosed or they're struggling with ADHD. I am here to tell you that is not true. That is a myth, and we will get to it in a minute. Myth number one is people think ADHD is a fast brain. They think that hyperactivity, lack of focus, social issues, stress are associated with a fast performing brain. That is a myth. The truth is that ADHD is actually a hypo-aroused brain. It's hypoarousal. It is a brain that is running too slow. So our brain has 5 main speeds that it's supposed to use across our day and across our life. And those brain speeds get us into the states that we need to get into. So extra slow brain speed delta is sleep mode. It's what keeps us asleep. Slow brain speed theta is what shifts us into sleep. Those are the culprits most of the time for ADHD. Then there's medium speed couch mode, and we want couch mode, right? I've been recording videos for my new short course workshops that are at drtrishleigh.com. They're all almost done, but I literally have been recording videos for days and days and days. I feel like I haven't left this chair because I haven't. So I could use some chill mode and some couch mode like you wouldn't believe. And I need couch mode because that will get my brain into a relaxed mode, and my brain will come down from all the thinking that I've been doing, and will come down from all the fatigue from lots of recording, and it will get me into a calm mode for the night. So tomorrow I can wake up and get into perfectly fast mode for focus again. So sometimes ADHD comes out of this medium couch mode being too high, but it usually is sleep mode that creates the need for hyperactivity. So if you think about it logically, if a brain is falling asleep all day long, it needs to stimulate itself to stay awake. And I remember one time one of the kids that I work with that struggles with ADHD was moving. And I said, can't you just sit still for just a minute? And he said, I can't. I feel like I'm going to fall asleep. And we have lots of people who will fall asleep during the brain map, believe it or not, because they're not being hyperactive. The minute they have to sit still so that we can acquire the brain map, they start to fall asleep. And that's because delta and theta are cranking during the day when they should not be. Delta and theta should only be being used with higher levels at night when we want to sleep. So if you're a person who can't sleep, presumably your delta and theta are not being used enough so that you're not able to get into sleep at night. Usually, and this is a nice segue, the problem with sleep is that a person's brain is making too much of the last brain speed, high beta, which cranks all day long. And those are people who suffer from anxiety or are really stressed out or who are in overdrive. That high beta makes it impossible to slow the brain down enough to be able to get into sleep and to be able to stay there all night long. So ADHD coexists with anxiety much of the time. And that's not my opinion. It's proven by science. So mental hyperactivity is anxiety, and it's stimulating the brain mentally. Physical hyperactivity is when a person has to move their body a lot. Both of them are a product of a brain that is running too slow. So either the brain kicks it into overdrive to offset the slowness, or the body kicks it in to overdrive to offset the slowness. Okay, so this is a really important slide, thinking about arousal. So here, this lovely little wave down the middle is a regulated arousal system. It is a brain that can use those 5 speeds appropriately across the day and can get into calm focus during the day to be able to go to school, to be able to be relaxed, but be able to be productive and get work done. When a system is hypo-aroused down here, that's when we see flat affect, depression, lethargy. We'll see people needing to self-stimulate to arouse the system, opposed to the optimal arousal zone is present. They're embodied, they're open, curious, be able to relax, yet very alert, able to think, able to relate with others. When people are feeling hopeless or they're full of shame, that's a hypo-aroused system. Opposed to way up here in hyperarousal is anxious, panic, restlessness. Hyperactive behaviors can come out of hyperarousal, but usually it's concomitant hyperarousal because of all of the hypoarousal when people have ADHD. It can create emotional flooding, impulsivity, risk-taking, hypervigilance. Our goal is to help you or your loved one be able to get into this regulated arousal zone, be able to neurologically regulate your brain so you can stay there. Here's another graphic, and I like this one too because here in the optimal arousal zone, it's the range of resilience. This is where learning happens. This is where change happens. This is where growth happens. This is optimal arousal. So if you are there most of the time, hopefully, or you've been there before, you know what it feels like to be calm and alert, not stressed out, but not groggy, feeling like you want to fall asleep. Down here in hypoarousal, this is where ADHD lives. And these again are the symptoms that come out of a hypoaroused nervous system. And again, Hyperarousal is an overstimulated nervous system that creates these symptoms up here. Okay, so let's look at what an ADHD brain pattern does look like. If it's not a fast brain, it's a slow brain. And here I just told you that theta is slow speed, and this is a acute EEG brain map. So what this looks like is we want, I call it the green zone. We want these heads of each of the speeds to be green. That means the brain is neurologically regulated and it's using the speed just the way that it's supposed to. When we see blue, it's too low. When we see red, it's too high. So on this map, theta, slow speed, is being used much too high, 3 times too high. Beta is being used low, 1 to 2 levels too low. That is the biomarker for ADHD. Science shows there's a 3-to-1 ratio of theta to beta for the diagnosis of ADHD. And this technology is being used to confirm diagnoses. So it looks like these pretty colors on the QEEG brain map, but what I wanted to show you is what the raw data looks like. So you can see these letters down the left-hand side, and this is time down on the x-axis. These letters are the sites that you see here. Each one of these dots, and I'm going to show you in a second, is a site on the brain. It's an international system that brain professionals use to be able to communicate about what's happening in a person's brain. Each one of these dots controls a certain skill or ability. When we see these waves open up and get really loose, that means that it's slow frequency. The different speeds that I'm talking about are actually the frequency of the electrical energy in your brain. When it goes slower, it gives you a slower state, like sleep. When it goes faster, it gives you a faster state, like stress and anxiety. So when we see these waves really open up and get loose and slow, that's an ADHD brain. Hopefully you are with me. Okay, so in comparison, you can see these fast, tight waves here, and this is beta and high beta, fast and extra fast speed, and it is cranking. It's being used 2 to 3 times too high here, and this is what it looks like on the raw EEG. Fast, tight waves of very fast electrical energy in the brain, which literally kicks your system into hyperarousal, opposed to ADHD is hypoarousal, and it overstimulates the system. Okay, that's myth number 1. ADHD is not a fast brain. It is a slow brain that's using strategies to offset the slowness. ADHD myth number 2. If a person tries hard enough, they can focus and be more productive. And I see parents accidentally do this to their children all the time, and actually spouses do it to their wife or husband. It's usually husband, because we know ADHD affects men twice as much as it does girls or young women. So usually it's a wife who is dissatisfied with her husband's productivity, and she thinks if he tried harder, he would just be more productive. I am here to tell you that is a myth. So we're going to look at the different areas of the brain, and you'll see that the frontal lobe is for socialization. It's for executive function, which is planning and organization. It's for attention. It's for working memory. It's for impulse control and judgment. The temporal lobes on the side are for emotional regulation. If they're impacted, it's difficult for a person to regulate their emotions and have strong self-regulation in that area. Across the central regions of the brain is the sensory motor cortex. That's when kids have difficulties with learning, because we have verbal comprehension, language production, the sensory motor cortex, and writing. So those are the learning pathways. And this is what it looks like. This is the system. It's called the 10-20 system. Attention, I already told you, attention up here in the frontal lobe. We have judgment over here. This is the sensory motor cortex. These circles line up to the dots that you just saw on the ADHD brain map and the anxiety brain map. And these circles, we have the bubbles here that show what the job or the skill or ability is that each of these areas controls. So hopefully you're following me. And when we see red or yellow on the brain map of this area, so if this area is red, that means attention will suffer. If this area is red, planning and organization will suffer. If this area over here is red, judgment's going to suffer. So this is how we know Oh, sorry, Siri thought I was talking to her. This is how we know what areas are impacted in the brain and what the likely symptoms are. So I will tell you that the way that I analyze maps is I always look at the map first and I see what it has to share with me. Then I dive into the person's history to match up symptomology to the impacted areas that I see. And I think most good, strong neurofeedback experts kind of roll the same way. Okay, so ADHD fact number 2 is that hypoarousal makes it very difficult to focus and engage. And honestly, for some people, if their whole brain map is red across all areas of the brain, it is likely that that person struggles in many different areas and cannot perform better with that neurologically dysregulated brain pattern. So an analogy that I use is if that person's trying their hardest, it means they're running their fastest. They're literally running as fast as they can. And that's like you telling them to run faster. Can you run faster if that's the skill set that you have? If that's the way that your body can perform right now? You can't. You can learn to run faster, which is exactly what we do to brains. We teach brains to perform better, so now the system can run faster. But with the system the way that it is right now, it cannot run faster. So when you tell a kiddo to focus, you're literally not doing anything. You're telling that person to run faster, even though they're running the fastest that they can. So that is the fact. And I tell parents in our office at Leigh Brain and Spine, my husband tells people that you have to have empathy for your child. And this is a little thing that I tell people to do. Stay up for 2 days. So if you're up for 2 days, guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to be exhausted. Your delta and your theta are going to be cranking. You're going to be cranky. Your high beta is going to be up. You're going to be stressed out. I want you to stay up for 2 days and go to work and work all day long. And I want you to tell me how you feel. I want you to tell me how easy it is to get through your day in a good mood, especially at the end of that day. It will be almost impossible because you need sleep. Because when you sleep, your delta and theta become refreshed and they go down and they're no longer high. When a person with ADHD sleeps, their delta and theta is still high the next day. That's why a lot of times it's difficult getting people with ADHD out of bed. So just recognize when delta and theta are high and it's red on a brain map, that person is trying their best. The best way to help them is to decrease the delta and theta production in their brain. Okay, so that is called neurological dysregulation syndrome. There's many different ways that a brain can be dysregulated, but that is in opposition to neurological regulation. Neurological regulation is the green zone. The brain is green in all of those speeds, so it can get to whatever speed it needs to throughout the day so that it can perform well. When a brain is using the ADHD pattern, it is stuck in too slow of mode. If that person also has anxiety that goes along with it, they are stuck in too fast mode also. Yes, we wish that those would balance each other out and split the difference, but they don't. A person can be pumping the brakes and pumping the gas simultaneously. All it means is that they're gassing and braking. It doesn't mean they're going perfect speed. So what we do is, as neurofeedback practitioners, we take the foot off the brake. Now the foot can come off the gas, and now the person's brain can use perfect speed and can process information at the proper rate so there's no hiccups in the system and they're able to self-regulate. So neurological regulation falls over into self-regulation, which equals willpower, emotional regulation, self-control, self-management, effortful control, and executive function. A regulated brain can shift in and out of gears as necessary, and especially on circadian rhythms like I just talked about, being able to sleep and being able to be awake during the day, and a dysregulated brain cannot. Okay, ADHD myth number 3. People have to live with ADHD and that they can only compensate for their difficulties and challenges and they have to take medication or they can only compensate. That's a myth. We live, it's going to be 2020, believe it or not. We live in 2020. Neuroscience and technology have come so far in many regards that medication is a Band-Aid. I always call medication a Band-Aid. We put that Band-Aid on to stop the bleeding. But does a Band-Aid actually heal the wound? No, it does not. It's just triage. If you want to heal that wound, you have to get stitches. So believe it or not, ADHD can be healed. I know some people don't like that I use the word healed. I use it anyways. And actually Norman Deutsch has a book that is called The Brain That Heals Itself, because brains and bodies heal themselves. We have the natural capacity for healing if our systems are pushed in the right direction. That's exactly what neurofeedback does. And that's why I want the world to know about neurofeedback, because hypoarousal is too much delta and theta production in the brain. And believe it or not, neurofeedback is a computer interfaced system that literally teaches the brain to make less delta and theta, which means hypoarousal decreases. When hypoarousal decreases, the brain works better, which means the mind and the body works better. The coolest thing is, not only is it proven scientifically, and it's been around for 65 years, and it has a truckload of science that proves that it works. When you work with a neurofeedback expert, they know what your brain map looks like, and they know what the trend screens look like, so they can gauge your progress based upon data. We can see these screens changing, so we know when we're decreasing the delta and theta production in your brain. We share that with you. Any good neurofeedback expert is going to share that data with you to show you your progress from a dysregulated brain to a more regulated brain, hopefully as close to the optimal brain as possible. This is what neurofeedback looks like. This is my son, Declan, the one who was sporting attitude that I told you about, but now he's younger, not 15. Here we have the sensors on his head in the areas that we see on the brain map that need to be regulated. Then he's connected into the neurofeedback transmitter that's connected into the computer, and it reads how the brain is performing. Neurofeedback does not put anything into your brain. It's a learning modality. Through feedback, through the eyes and the ears, it teaches your brain to make more of perfect processing speed in the middle, alpha and low beta, and less of the extremes, less of delta and theta, all that slow speed, and less of high beta, all that anxious speed if your brain is making it. Over time, it becomes your new operating mode, and this old mode is weeded over. And what that does is it breaks the negative feedback loop that you're stuck in, and it creates a positive feedback loop that literally becomes a flywheel of permanent change for you. No joke, that's what the science shows. That's why I get so excited, which is why we want brains in the green zone of neurological regulation, not overactive, not underactive, but using the proper speed. This is another type of map. So you might see two different variations. This is the green zone. The frontal lobe is performing just the way that it's supposed to. And this shows delta being produced a little low, but we do not want it being produced high. That's what the green zone looks like. This is a neurofeedback training trend screen. You can see all this training up and down. You can see these spikes. A downward trend of theta means that the brain is producing less delta and theta within this session. This is a great response to training, and we can measure it. I know it doesn't mean much to you, but it means a lot to your neurofeedback practitioner. Scientific studies show that the theta to beta ratio is the way to go, and there's large improvements in intention and impulsivity, and medium improvement for hyperactivity. And this is an Arns et al. Medium is big, just so you know. When it comes to scientific studies, medium and large improvements are big improvements. They're significant. The effects of neurofeedback have been shown to actually change brain performance, and then it rolls out into people's behaviors. So this is neuroplasticity. I always say that neuroplasticity is our best friend if we're doing all the right stuff, and our worst enemy if we are not. This is an example of how that works. So neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to change itself. So we talk about it as our brain's ability to improve itself, but it only improves itself if we're pushing it in the right direction. So the brain patterns that I just shared with you for ADHD and anxiety, they literally will get worse over time as they're being used. It's called Hebb's Law. Neurons that fire together wire together. So if you keep using the ADHD pattern, you are wiring it in by use on accident. That's why symptoms will get worse, more medication will be necessary, plus it titrates down because of your body acclimating to it, but the patterns will get worse over time. That's what I mean by breaking the negative feedback loop, because as we create this new pattern, now we're using neuroplasticity as our best friend, doing all the right stuff, and we can even change that brain pattern for ADHD and anxiety, create a new one for calm focus. No joke, that's how it works. Okay, so I'm just gonna check and see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions in the question box, and I'm trying to stay on time because the last couple of webinars I went over pretty significantly. And we are in perfect timing right now. We have 4 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please put them in. It's looking like a quiet night, maybe because I'm cranking so fast through the information. But before you go, find your local neurofeedback expert. Hopefully they've referred you to my webinar. If you're in my community in Chapel Hill, Raleigh-Durham area, we would love to see you at Leigh Brain and Spine. But if you are not ready to go to a neurofeedback practitioner, either go to the practitioner that sent you here and get more information from them, or you're always welcome to go to, this is my personal professional website, right? That's an oxymoron. It's not Leigh Brain and Spine. I have my own website called Dr. Trish Leigh. You know how this goes. On my professional website at Leigh Brain and Spine, it's regulated because it's a healthcare practice. So I'm not able to say whatever I want. So I created a website where I can say whatever I want, and I do. And so what I say there is I give you brain tips so that you can use tools to regulate your own brain pattern on a daily basis. If you're really stuck in one of these brain patterns, it might help you this much, but if you use them over time, it will keep moving you in the right direction. At the bottom of each one of these blog posts, there's tips for neurofeedback experts that you can also glean great information on how neurofeedback could help you if you were interested in it. And I always talk about the science there too. So go to my website at Dr. Trish Leigh, put your name in, and each week you're going to get a tip in your inbox in your email. And this is an example of one, focus tips for ADHD and anxiety. People really loved that post, and it's just an example, and there's all new ones there on ADHD, anxiety, and addictions. They're comorbid, social anxiety. There's lots of posts there for you. Okay, so if there's no questions, which is a new concept because usually there's lots, I'm going to bid you adieu for the night and get my fanny out of this chair and go chill, probably watch A Good Place because I've gotten sucked into them. I find them to be very slow and they get my brain into the calm zone before I go to bed in just the perfect way. If you have any other thoughts or questions for me, at Dr. Trish Leigh, you can send me you can put your information into the contact form and I'd be happy to answer, or you can send me an email at info@drtrishleigh. I'm always happy to help. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to end this webinar. Go have an awesome night. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again. Good night.